Hello, everybody. My name is Chad Blair. I'm the politics editor at Honolulu Civil Beat. Let me just first say that whenever I fly to Hilo or any of the neighbor islands, or anytime I get out of Honolulu, my blood pressure comes down. It is a delight to be in your town, especially on such a sunny, beautiful day. I was expecting rain. No, the trains are blowing and I'm too humid. So it's great to be here. I first came to visit Hilo 40 years ago when I was dating someone at Ash Adult Student Housing at Hilo. That's another story altogether. You're not here to hear that. This is not a formal debate. This is more relaxed. We're not going to stick to a hard schedule. If we're still here at 7, I'd be surprised. But I do know that we want to have a good 60, 70, 80 minutes or so with our two candidates today, and not only with questions from Kevin Gaten, my colleague, but also you, or maybe I should just mention right now, we prefer the index card system, and the reason is we just don't like somebody to get up. You've all seen it if you've attended a forum. Someone gets up, asks a question, and then 20 minutes go by. And this way I can kind of filter and do that. Ben and Natalie are wearing the Civil Beat t-shirts, and you can just bring them up here to see me occasionally looking at my laptop, because sometimes I'm getting questions from Ben and Natalie as well. So if you have questions, that's the way that we're going to handle these. Let me introduce our candidates. Lorraine Inouye, of course, is the incumbent from Senate District 1. She is the former mayor of Hawaii County, which is the first time I met her way back. We were talking about the eclipse on Mauna Kea back in 1991. And also a former county council member, Laura Acasio, a former state senator as well, very active in the Democratic Party, and I got to know her a little bit, not only when we were in the Senate, but afterwards, and that's been a real treat. Kevin, by the way, in addition to covering political stuff, the state government, and that's where he and I work closely together, covering the legislature and the governor, but also his real beats are Honolulu Rail. Lucky you having that one. You guys are so lucky.
Probably come up.
You're so lucky you love the rail system. It's such a mess, but thank God Kevin's covering it. He also covers broadband, very important issue, particularly for big island like yours, rural communities, and also the prisons and the jails here, including right here in your town. And it's a pleasure to work with him. He's my friend as well as my colleague. There is food and there is water. Get up anytime you want, and when we're POW, feel free to take something home, because I'm not taking her back on the plane with me tonight. Kevin lives here, Natalie lives here, but Ben, actually I'm staying in Hilo tonight. I'm so excited about that. We are not live, but we are recording both audio and visual. We will be posting this to the Civil Beat website sometime in the next day or two, unedited, and unless something really extreme happens, I don't think that's going to be the case. It'll also be posted on YouTube. We decided to do something different this year. We had already been doing what we call newsroom pop-ups, and that's where we drive our Civil Beat van. It's an orange van, you can't miss it. It's Civil Beat all over it. And we go to communities on Oahu to get us out of Honolulu, to go visit the North Shore, to go visit the Windward Side. But we've also been visiting the neighbor islands, usually at the public libraries. And we've been in Waimea, we've been in Hilo, we've been in Kea, we've been in, I don't think we've done Kona yet, may not. But we've done Lanai, we've done Molokai, we've done Maui and Kauai, and they're terrific. We decided during the election season to add a twist to that and call them election pop-ups. We really feel it's important to get out of Honolulu. One of the biggest problems, I would say, still in state government, is too Honolulu-centric. That's where the state capital is. That's probably a question I'm going to ask both of you, or Kevin's going to ask it. And I can tell you the stories we hear, the people that we meet, there's no way we would experience that unless we got on a plane and flew somewhere. So we're committed to the community. We are a nonprofit, and that's why we're trying to do these things. I don't know that we're going to go the whole time, as I said, but we do want to be able to break early enough so we can talk story and you can come up and meet the candidates or meet Kevin and I. But I really don't think we'll go super long. It's going to be something to talk, and based on just the cards I've gotten already, we're very, very happy. One other thing, both Laura and Lorraine have filled out candidate Q&As. That's another thing we do. We offer Q&As, 10, 11 questions, pretty good questions, I'd say. And we post them on our website, doesn't cost any money. And so whatever we don't get to today, and there'll probably be some overlap, you can go online and read their Q&As, as well as Q&As for all the other candidates that have so far submitted. As you know, Laura was just telling me, we believe the ballots are going out
Tomorrow?
tomorrow,
Next day.
they have to have them completed or sent to you by the 23rd, because next week. And as you know, August 10th is coming very, very quickly, the primary. So without further ado, I do want to also say thank you to Hilo High School. Go Vikings for having us here. And I think I'm going to turn to Kevin to ask the first question.
Sure, it's a pleasure having you. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. I like to ask candidates what you picked up when you campaigned with, because you always do something interesting. Maybe not
Speak up a little
We're
bit.
going to definitely have to speak up because we don't have microphones.
Okay, is this loud enough?
Yes.
This will work? Okay, so my apologies. So basically, I'd like to ask you sort of what you're hearing on the campaign trail, maybe the top issue that you've heard from your constituents while you've been campaigning, and a little bit about what your insights are into it. So, Laura, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you for the question. First of all, I wanted to thank you for being here, for giving this opportunity for civic engagement and the work that you folks do in the reporting, because it is critical for an engaged and informed electorate to have accurate news and an outlet such as yours, and definitely putting forward that Q&A is also very, very helpful. So thank you for that. And then to answer the question, I have been knocking on doors since October, every day, minus about 10 days that we didn't go out because of hard rain. And I would say by and large, the most frequent answer when we ask what are their concerns is housing, homelessness, cost of living. They're all tied in. Of course, I would also include in that concept is mental health issues, of course, anything that contributes systemically to being homeless. We have a lot of our community members, as I'm walking doors, that are on fixed income. They are, they're aging population in Hilo, and they are very concerned about being able to afford to stay in their homes. Of course, this is coupled with healthcare costs that they're incurring in terms of caregiving, but again, it's really housing. The secondary piece to that housing is safety, but again, the safety, what I'm hearing from community is the safety in relationship to a rising homeless population and feeling unsafe in our communities. Predominantly, folks point to downtown, but I think at this point, it's pervasive all throughout our community because of our large unsheltered population.
Senator?
Yes, thank you. And thank you as well for being here. It's great to see the word civil heat on the Big Island and in particular East Hawaii. With regards to the question, we've been having talk story sessions as well. And let me say that my rounds at supermarkets or walking in downtown has been very, very interesting. And most important, it's the kupuna that comes out and asks of questions of their concerns. However, in my visit, when I was elected 2 years ago, my staff and I did our visits to downtown as well as to the entire district. With that said, I have been very interested in hearing and seeing the work that's need to be addressed. Undone work, as an example, at Waikia Intermediate School, one of the buildings, C buildings, is in disrepair. The foundation is breaking up. There are leakage in the on the grounds because they have leaking problems in the entire building. Walking into the classroom, covered an area, it's a science building, and there's no water coming out of the faucets. With that said, on top of visiting other areas as well with our fishers and the Wailoa River entry part that we're doing dredging right now. The accumulation of the sand has been in the area, my understanding, like several years before we visited the area 2 years ago. The issue with funding with DOBAR was an issue There was no grants and CIPs done so that they could dredge the harbor. So the first CIP project that I did was to make sure that we have $3.5 million to start the process. I have been not happy with the process because it took us close to a year and a half to get permits as well as start the project. The issue with regards to the kupuna, and not only the kupuna, was at the markets, I've lost my primary doctor because of the issue that we all heard and understand. We had our physicians moving out. We've lost many of our providers. That has been a big concern. However, in the year, 2 years ago, actually it's the 23rd session, I introduced SB 1035, which was approved by the governor, which became Act 90, which also created an exemption for the providers not to continue to pay the excise tax. And so with that said, I'm sure that it won't happen until 2026. And there has been questions about why the delay. And it's an ordinary system that we normally do when we create new divisions. We need to make sure that the administration has enough staffing to create positions within the Budget and Finance Office and work on the technicality of how to proceed without those budget items in the near future.
So, since you thank you for bringing up the question of taxes, because there was a major tax bill which year passed. I think the number that I got from the state tax department was $7 billion in lost revenue over the next 8 years. The tax cuts are going to be substantial. I think most of us are going to notice them and we're going to see a little extra money, and that's really going to help a lot of people, I'm sure. But at the same time, for people who've watched state government for a long time, you have to wonder where that money's going to come from. I think we probably collect a total of about $10 billion a year in taxes at the moment. And losing $1 billion, something close to $1 billion a year is a big hit. Do you see us, I'll start with you, Senator, do you see us taking a major financial hit in terms of?
Well, we won't see it immediately, and that's another reason why we delayed the exemption for the providers to happen in 2026. Now, another issue that has come to mind with the money committees as well is when we also looked at the standard deductions in our taxes that we lowered with the issue of how much we are going to take a hit on it as well. So it's an issue that we won't see for the next couple of years. However, it will take us through with the least amount of income. We won't see the changes with regards to, as we mentioned about the standard deductions that we gave all of our citizens over the period. But with the income that we will be receiving, hopefully, from the increase with those that we depend on, such as the visitor arrivals. And so that's not the only income that we're looking forward to. However, we did have good news after the governor signed all the bills that we were told that we've had an increase in excise tax in the last several months. So there is an amount of $35 million that has been found this year when the governor signed and completed his budget.
Okay.
Yes.
Laura?
So I have a little bit different take on HB 2404. And that is that it's not telling the whole story. And I think I did allude to this, or actually I clarified it in my answer in the Civil Beat questionnaire, is that HB 2404 in conference committee went through some extreme changes that weren't discussed during the regular session. And I bring it up because I think that is a big fundamental piece to transparency in government that needs to shift, in that we have a constitutional obligation to hear and gather public testimony and to publicly discuss and vote on a bill, and then conference committee comes at the very last section, and this is for folks that know, maybe some folks know and don't know, but the very last portion is generally considered behind closed doors, and it's a discussion amongst leadership predominantly, and oftentimes lobbyists. And so my concern with HB 2404 is that it went through some really drastic changes without public input. And the story that is being shared publicly is this record-breaking historic tax cut. But when we actually look at the data, I do have a graph here, but our bottom 20% income, which it goes up to folks making $27,000 or more, get roughly $350 back, maybe up to, or a deduction up to $600. But then as we go up in our scale of income, up to $147,000, you might receive $1,000. And while that is beneficial, no complaints in terms of getting money back, because when you're working paycheck to paycheck, living paycheck to paycheck, and $400 could be another round at the grocery store, could be diapers, could be really essential items like medication. We actually go all the way to the top of the pay scale, which is our top 1% earners. Our top earners are the 1% of our population. They're making $678,000, and they get $6,000 in return. So it's proportional, and I look at that as actually a regressive tax. And by definition, when we look at the Democratic platform, which I am a Democrat, and this is the Democratic primary, it specifically states in our plank to tax those who can afford to be taxed and not the lower and middle income, which we see historically over the past, since trickle-down theory, we have a diminishing middle class, of extreme growing lower class, and then we have an extreme upper class. And so when we have this tax structure that is flaunted as historic for working class, I find that very problematic and actually disheartening that it's disingenuous in terms of actually addressing the issues of supporting folks who need it the most. I'll transition because you were talking about the deficit in our
I'm asking about the impact.
Yeah, so the impact then becomes what services get cut first. Are social services that predominantly help lower and middle class. And so that's kind of a double whammy when services for homelessness, services for education, for CIP, for our schools, those housing, especially affordable housing, those are the first to get cut. And so not only is it not actually, we're going to have to make up for that. So that's the job of the legislature then, is to make up that deficit by creating other tax or creating other revenue sources, whether it's tax or in other innovative ways.
So just to follow up for both of you, please, are you suggesting that we won't be able to just go our merry way from this tax cut? That the tax cut takes effect and either we do make substantial cuts in the budget or we find other sources of revenue? You're saying that's our choice?
Those are the two choices, because it's...
Senator, do you agree with that?
Well, 2404 never passed.
Not the original one.
Yes. So, did the bill pass or not? What's the act number?
I'll double check the number.
Yes.
I don't have the act number memorized.
But the tax cut did pass, for sure.
What we're talking about.
The governor signed it.
Yes.
Well, there's several issues with regards to that, and I believe I probably voted no on that issue. There were several of us.
I'd have to check, Senator. I believe it was unanimous in both the House and Senate in favor.
It did pass.
Yes.
Are we thinking SB 3093,
SB 24.
2404.
HB or SB?
HB 2404. Anyway, but Senator,
It is the tax cut bill, and it did, I have to look to see where Lorraine is on this, but but it passed nearly unanimously and it's become law, yes. So it is H 24.
So, Senator, just to follow up, and what she's suggesting is that either, the choices that we have are either to find new revenue sources because we've lost too much revenue, or impose some pretty substantial cuts, and if that's what.
And there will be several cuts already identified with the governor's opposition when he vetoed several of the bills.
Right.
And his discussion was, and there has been discussions with leadership, with the speaker and the president of what items were going to be cut as well. So I believe that what his plans are is actually what was going to happen next session. Next session, the legislature or the Senate was going to revisit all of the agencies and do some reforms. And that will come definitely next year.
And it was a full, all 25 members of the
Yes.
Senate did vote in favor of this. I mentioned that other bill, that was the companion bill.
I wasn't part of the conference
Yeah.
committee, but I agree, though, that there were tumultuous opposition to the changes made as
Let me
well.
just have a quick follow-up, and then I want to switch to corruption. This conference committee period, if you're a reporter covering the legislature like both Kevin and I do, I call it kabuki theater, because you kind of watch the chairs to go, are they signaling a compromise? Do they have a CD1? It's very hard to read. You do have to have good context. But to Laura's point, and I think Lorraine would agree with this, you are keeping the public out of that, and you're not just tweaking a bill. Sometimes you are majorly, in this case, the tax bill, but there are many more, majorly rewriting, sometimes even placing. Is that something that you would work to change if you get back in the Senate, if you stay in the Senate? The conference committee period, that's the last 2 weeks, just before the ledge wraps up its final business. Lorraine?
I refuse to make any changes to conference bills that's substantial. And I'll give you an example. We had an energy bill that came before. It wasn't introduced by me. However, I was the lead Senate chair for the conference committee as well, working with Nicole Lowen, who was the introducer of that particular bill, but there were substantial recommendations and changes to the measure by the House. Now, because of the introducer of the bill, Representative Lowen wanted to make sure that we pass her measure that would require substantial introductions to a change in statute with regards to energy or measure. However, because of the input that came out of members in the Senate, in the House, that I refused to make the changes when we decided we can't support the original measure as it stands. And so when I was presented with making and agreeing to a change to that bill, I actually killed the bill because
Even
it
though she's
was
your colleague from the other side.
exactly. And let me share with you, when the advocates for that measure, who were predominantly energy supporters, advocates for the bill, they asked to see a copy of the revisions that I was presented, and I did mention that those that would like to see what was presented before the Senate, they were able to get copies of it. Of course, it wasn't to the liking of my colleagues in the Senate, so I did go against my colleagues with regards to transparency and measures that have been changed substantially, that I actually said we will not be moving this
Okay,
measure.
and even then, even though there is testimony, you printed out the changes, public still can't. I feel like I'm in high school.
You are.
The poll gate will be closed at 5:45 p.m. All gates will be locked at 6 p.m. Again, the poll gate will be closed at 5:45 p.m. and all gates will be locked at 6 p.m. Thank you.
You're welcome. We checked on this.
Parking will remain open.
There we go.
We will be able to leave.
Okay, all right. So what I'm hearing from you, Lorraine, is that because you will not accept a major change in conference
Exactly.
committee, and here's an example where you did not. Laura, your position on conference committee and voting on these major changes.
Yes, so it does happen very often. And I think right now we have an extremely low public trust in government because of all kinds of reasons. And so this is an area that we can do immediate reform without passing law. The Senate and the House have rules, and we can decide at the beginning of the legislature through consensus to shift those rules. And so we could look at conference committee as a place where we could decide to have public votes. In the 2 years that I was in the Senate, I was on conference committees. I was told by colleagues that if you vote no or with reservations, you will not be placed on conference committee, which makes sense in a lot of ways because, in some ways, because you haven't supported the bill, the measure along the way. And in terms of being the transparency along the way in terms of our conversation and our vote is already evident within the public domain. I think, though, automatic, we could start with public votes, because what happens with conference committee is oftentimes the conferees don't even get to see the drafts. It's
Before they vote.
Before they vote. And it's expected that if you're on a conference committee, you vote yes. And there is potential repercussion. There are a lot of different ways that leadership can hold folks accountable to not doing that. And it does take a lot of courage. To get into those conversations is really important. And I think fundamentally that's where we need to address more egalitarian process with our transparency and our ability to be forthcoming to the public. Because again, if we have a bill that completely morphs, like you said, becomes ultimately a gut and replace, it's not generally now because the Supreme Court ruled against gut and replace, it still has to maintain that same subject matter with the title. However, you can have two bills with the same title that essentially do something completely opposite. So,
And had
you know,
three public hearings.
and had 3 public hearings. So the part about it too is that I also feel like, you know, if anyone spends time at the legislature, you know that the joke, and it's actually not a joke, because this is about law that affects all of our lives. But conference committee is known colloquially as the place where all good bills go to die. And I think
I've heard
we're
that.
laughing because, you know, I'm sure Senator Lorraine knows as well. So
Okay, okay,
But I disagree with her
okay. Yes,
to that point.
Got that across. I'm
Yes.
going to hold off on the corruption question because I took up too much time. Kevin, it's back to you.
I wanted to
I
talk
just-
about taxes again.
Well, I just want to say that that's totally not true, because in the
Which part's not
conference,
true?
the conference committee, when you do revisions, there is a CD, a draft.
Correct. A
And
conference
each-
draft.
A conference draft, and that becomes a distribution to all conference members. Now, in my case, we've always sent members of my conference on the Senate version, including the House conferees, and they have to acknowledge that they received my conference draft to my office. Now, with that, having said that, I disagree that they would, in my cases that I've been involved, it's always transparency and the votes are there. Now, we don't control votes now on the other side of the House.
But fair to say that other senators and representatives don't necessarily follow your.
Exactly. Sure,
Okay,
sure.
all right. Kevin, please.
Okay, I think one of the major, I'm interested in taxes, as you can probably tell. One of the major proposals that's been kicked around for the last couple of years is this idea of being called right now a green fee, which would be the idea that we could ease the tax burden on local residents by basically putting the squeeze on tourists to a greater degree. And the governor's had a couple of different proposals that he's kicked around. One of them being becoming very close to just basically simply increasing the TAT, the hotel room tax. That's one possibility, but I think you both know, the hotels are not in favor of further increases in that tax. I think it's at 10.25 now?
I think that's what it
I think it
is.
is. In any case, so the question is whether you philosophically or as a practical matter, you would agree with the idea that we ought to be taking more from tourists and using that as a way to ease the tax burden on locals. And if that's workable, it can be done.
I can answer that question. That bill was before my committee this past session. I did not hear it. Several reasons. Because we have the visitors already paying for the TAT tax, which is the tourist accommodations tax. That includes all of us who pay it as well when you travel to Oahu or Maui or Kauai, wherever you travel, we all pay for it. We're paying for it at restaurants, we're paying for it as well. Now, my opposition to raising fees, and there's records in the legislature that I have voted no, including my vice chair on the transportation committee, when my chair has increased fees to certain items as well. So I have, on the governor's proposal, I did not move it forward because there was not enough debate on it. In the Senate, in the House, they did have, I understand, a hearing. It wasn't well taken, but at that point in time for this year, our people are struggling. Why are we increasing another tax? And to me, whether it's being paid by a visitor, but remember, we have families that come home to Hawaii. If you have family that was a resident here, moved to the mainland, on their arrival, they're paying for it. So the idea of that additional tax was also going to be considered when you are at, whether it's Hapuna Beach or all of the state parks, to be added as another fee. And I refuse to let us have a discussion on raising fees. Now, with regards to the TAT, I have a problem with the distribution and where those monies go. When I was on the council and the adoption of the TAT, which is, that happened in, I believe, 1997 or something like that, earlier on in the 80s. When I got to the council, the TAT was already in place. And the concept of the creation of the TAT, you charge the visitor, and that should go to the accommodations of where or what is used by the visitor. Improve your parks. Monies go to the counties to make sure that the expenditures go to the counties and to the state, to, as an example, to the DLNR parks, so they can have monies to renovate and to make improvements to their parks. However, over time, that accommodation tax was changed by statute. And the use was, part of it goes to the general fund. And so they took out the funds from there to go to the extreme of adding income, so that whatever we spend on the end budget, we have other priorities. However, the use of the TAT is not enough to sustain making improvements. So what happens thereafter in the coming years, we extended the accommodations that the counties can raise taxes if they want to pay for restrooms or facilities that they need. And this county accepted and created an increase in our taxes. If you remember, a couple of years ago, and some of us or some of you has agreed that you're going to allow the county to increase that tax. So aside from the real property taxes, they added the 3% of taxes that you were all paying. So my position in this coming session is to revisit the distribution of the TAT to see how the impact with what the governor wants to do is increase a new tax. And so can we afford to allow our own Ohana coming back home, having to pay the additional tax, but the visitors are already paying for the TAT. And so.
And we all understand that's the transient accommodation tax, the hotel tax.
And I'm against raising fees, period, and so that was one of them.
So I would definitely support Governor Green's proposal. I didn't read the details of it, and that does make a difference for this particular, and we don't know what will be proposed for next year exactly. So in part of my job as a state senator is doing my due diligence to listen to the testimony, to have discussions with all stakeholders, and especially read the detail of the bill. And I am in favor of a nominal fee for visitors because the majority of our visitors are not our residents. So it is a fee, not a tax. Taxes would be for our residents. A fee is, although the discussion with the hotels as to whether they administer it through a TAT or separately, I would definitely want to get into much more detail, would pay attention to all of the testimony, which reach out to folks who are in the business, boots on the ground, because I do hear, and I was at a business panel on Friday, Pacific Business News hosted, and that two of the folks on the panel are part of the hospitality industry, and they definitely had concerns about them being the administrators of this particular fee. And so I don't think it necessarily has to go through the TAT, and it can be nominal, because even a nominal fee with 10 million visitors per year is a way to make up perhaps a deficit of, the cut that was just proposed or just signed into law. And it's evidence-based. If we look at some place like Palau, they have very high standards in terms of their environment. And they charge an exorbitant amount of money, actually, or I don't know about exorbitant, but it's definitely a large amount for visitor fees. And it does end up limiting the amount of folks that come, but that is part of the visitor experience, is to not have jam-packed areas where folks are not as, it's not as conducive to a comfortable, relaxing vacation because it's so busy. The thing that I do want to address with the TAT is really important because it's an idea that I would propose as legislation, is that if we go to stay in Waikiki as residents of Hawaii, we pay the TAT. The way to do that, we can't say that we wouldn't pay that because constitutionally we can't charge a California resident TAT and not a Hawaii resident, just because of the commerce clauses and different things around that. So, but what we can do as a state is offer a rebate or a credit on our state taxes. Let's say someone does travel a lot for business or even for pleasure, they collect their receipts, they have an amount, and then there's a deduction based on that. So essentially, residents would be getting that back, or at least a portion of it back, but it would not violate that constitutional piece, right? And these are ways that we can do that across the board to where visitors are getting charged for the usage of the place, and they're often, in an extractive tourism model, which is what we have historically had here in Hawaii, there's a lot of take. And so here's an opportunity, even though it's financial, it's an opportunity to give back. Of course, with a regenerative model of tourism, there's many more ways to give back as well, but that's a start.
Okay, thank you. This question is coming from our audience of corruption. We'll go with Laura first and then Lorraine. How will you address corruption, pay-to-play, and cronyism in Hawaii state politics?
That's my favorite because I already have, in the sense that I am not taking, the fundamental premise of my campaign style is walking door to door. That is free, it takes work, it takes energy, Someone wants to talk for 5 minutes, great, 30 seconds. Someone wants to talk for 45 minutes, I'm there. Because I am fundamentally here to listen to the community and represent community. I could do big call time to donors. I could have Honolulu fundraisers. To me, that then begins to represent, then I'm representing Honolulu. Just to give a quick story, I did talk with a head of one of the labor unions, construction union specifically, and I was inviting him to my launch party. This was back in September. And the comment was, hey, I support you personally. He is a resident and a voter, and I was grateful to hear that. But, you know, Honolulu makes the decision. And so it kind of stopped me in my tracks in sense of saying, wow, so are you trying to tell me that if this particular union, construction union, supports a candidate, then they represent Honolulu, not our residents. And so again, for me, it just comes down to the practice of being very careful of who I take money from for our campaign, keeping it to individuals and small dollar donations is really fundamentally how I've run my campaign to begin with.
Go ahead.
There's,
You wanna add-
that's on a more personal approach to my campaign. In terms of in the legislature, we can address it with campaign finance reform, clean elections. We can address it in, fair, I'm forgetting the title of the commission that.
Foley Commission.
The Foley Commission, yeah. The Foley Commission came up with a lot of great examples, but there are tons more. We could have, instead of unilateral control of a chair to decide whether or not to hear a bill, which then blocks discussion ultimately, because the whole point of good civic discourse is to have that discussion. That doesn't mean there's pressure to pass it when it's not ready to pass, but that discussion is fundamental to good lawmaking. And so, making it more egalitarian, like I had said before too, is public votes, and that a chair cannot decide to defer unilaterally a bill, but that if a bill is signed on by a certain number of legislators, then it automatically gets a hearing. There are a lot of different methods, actually, and that's just a summary.
And I think we could easily spend a whole forum talking about this.
Yep.
And some of the Foley recommendations did pass, others did not. Perhaps the biggest one, which was not necessarily Foley's idea, public financing, comprehensive public financing of elections. That may come up a little bit later, but I want to go to Lorraine to get your thoughts on corruption and how to end this pay-to-play pattern and cronyism.
I think it's an independent issue. When you elect legislators or anyone running for office, you would also be supporting a person that you believe in. That's what campaigning is all about. Be out there to meet the people as well as selling yourself. Now, this is a rather interesting topic, is because your question, I've heard several answers to different sides. So what's your original question?
I'd be happy to go back to the original.
Yes.
And again, it comes from you guys.
Yes.
How will you, your district, how will you address corruption, pay-to-play, and cronyism in Hawaii state politics?
Well, again, going back to it's the person that's running for office. Another thing that comes to the discussion is term limits and how long the person is there as well. Now, I have been in office many times, and this is one of, let's say, 16 or 17 elections that I've been involved with. I get elected because of the person who I am, and I don't believe in a pay to play. Let me share with you an issue that would involve all of you. I do receive contributions. Now, when you're out there raising funds, you're selling yourself, and if a person wants to contribute and see that you get re-elected or elected, it's on the person's quality and the trust. Now, here's what I'm going to offer and share with you, an issue that came up that would have been devastating on your car insurance. There were two lobbyists, and both of them were contributors to my campaign. Now, one was to allow an increase in your auto insurance. There was the other lobbyist that was there trying to kill that measure. And that was rather important for me because I'm vice chair of the Committee on Transportation. I used to be the transportation chair for all the years, absent of 2 years when we reorganized and became the chair of the Committee on Water and Land. Now, I understand what's happening with transportation. On top of that, the burden, it goes to your personal livelihood. Now, that measure was, okay, who am I going to believe? But personally, I'm saying I am not one to raise fees. And why are we going to pass legislation to make sure that we change the statute so we can raise a fee on your car insurance? So I have taken the position that I'm not supporting it. And in actuality, it did pass. It passed the Senate, it went to the House, it came back to the Senate again, and I had lobbied to make sure that that measure dies before it goes even to conference, and it did. And so sorry, but I am a person that has been in office for all these years, and people know that. And if they trust you, they will continue to support you. And the voters have a choice of the election process.
Senator, I want to be sure I understand the bill that you're talking about. There was a bill that passed this year that would have required increased the mandatory minimum insurance for motorists, yeah? Usually the only people who buy the minimum would be people who can only afford the minimum. And this would have increased the mandatory minimum. That passed, yeah?
There was one that didn't pass at all because, matter of fact, it did get to the Congress, but the bill died.
Okay, so you're talking about another bill that
Probably,
passed.
but this
Okay.
would have increased the.
And I know Laura wants to say something. I would just say, I mean, at the core of this is the fact that two of your former colleagues, Ty Cullen and Kalani English, took money, took poker chips, took other things from Milton Choi, who just died in prison sadly, in order to kill legislation that would have harmed his business. He was involved in the water treatment, sewage treatment. And, this goes to the core of the question. If you're taking money from donors, are you listening to them, or are you actually deciding on the merits of the case? Because it's not just Ty Cullen and Kalani English who are now out of prison, by the way. But we can go and name example and example and example. And it seems to be Hawaii's actually been elevated to now be one of the most corrupt politically states in the nation, something that I think a lot of us have come to feel very much shame. But that's, I think, is the core of this question, Laura.
Yeah, on top of that, also, it's a record number of incumbents running unopposed. And there's a reason for that, is because the narrative is that they're unbeatable because they have $180,000 in their bank account already. And so some of the things we can do is put caps on the amount. This is not a gubernatorial statewide race. Like for things like House, County Council, State Senate, they're small. They're walkable generally. I mean, not all districts are actually walkable, but they're small relatively. And so you don't necessarily, we don't need to spend $200,000 on an election if we are out in community and meeting folks and have that reputation. So caps on spending, comprehensive public financing, no contributions from other electeds, because what happens is they pool money, and we saw that in the article that
We have
came
a
out
story
today.
today about that.
It's a good one, read it, it came out today. And it's a common practice where other electeds who don't have hard races, but have a lot of money in their campaign, they call it war chest, can then donate to other campaigns with the hopes that once they get in, or not even hopes, with the the assumptions that there are then loyal. And there's this loyalty, and I do know this because I was in the Senate. So I can tell you that this does happen. It's real, it's not pretend. And I'm not saying everyone participates in it. So by no means am I trying to incriminate, of course, Senator Inouye at this, right now, but it does happen. And so no contributions from electeds, because that eliminates that kind of hierarchy and pecking order that is inherent in leadership and the factions. I feel like it happens more in the House than in the Senate, but it does happen also in
It
the
is an
Senate.
interesting idea that you give money to a politician and then gives it to somebody else.
Right, yes, right.
Yes.
Caps on rolling over as well. So that's another one where if you can amass millions of dollars, who can run against you? Who can win? So it's this thing where money does actually speak volumes, because you can put, radio ads are very expensive. TV ads, even more expensive. Tribune Herald ad, extremely expensive. Door knocking, basically free. It takes time, so there is privilege. And bottom line, it comes down to, we either serve privilege and power, or we serve truth and justice. And those, of course, there's a spectrum, but when it comes down to it, here's one more thing, attorney-client privilege. So if we have chairs who are active attorneys in their private practice, because we're ultimately not going to stop corruption. If people are going to be dishonest, they're going to be dishonest. But this is problematic because if we have chairs who are attorneys, they determine whether you can kill a bill or hear a bill, pass a bill, influence their fellow legislators on how the outcome of the bill is. And in their private practice, a lobbyist could come into their office and give them a $200,000 retainer, and it's between those two people what they're talking about, and it could very well be kill that bill or pass this bill. And so there's all of these extra rooms, areas for that. But fundamentally what I'm talking about is there are a lot of places where we can improve our system to create more transparency and then gain back the trust.
Thank you. Kevin.
I'd like to turn and talk about something else. Is that all right? All right. Housing.
I just want to say with regards to the contributions from one elected office to another running for office, and that article was a great article to read today. And just to let you know, you can go back to all of my setup when I first ran for office in 1984 until today. I have not given any politician or a person running for office monies from my campaign. And I thank my husband and my campaign treasurer, Lorraine, for keeping everyone that has to do with my campaign and contributions coming out of the funds, that it be for the purpose of running for office as well.
Are you popular at the Senate?
Well, maybe I'm not like a lot of my colleagues, but I'm just proud and honored that the people on this district continues to
Fair
elect
enough.
me.
On to housing, an extremely important issue right here on this island.
Sure. I mean, I think most people look at the people who are leaving the state, local residents who are moving away or being compelled to move away. And probably the primary thing in most cases is just cost of living, and that's driven by and large by housing. And there's two things I wanted to talk about. There's two proposals that almost with the stroke of a pen, some people think they could make a difference in the housing market. One of them is a vacant homes tax, which has been tried in other cities. Might work here, might not, I don't know. It's never passed. And the other would be basically doing something about vacation rentals and getting them out of the vacation market and into the overall rental, the general rental market. And I'm interested in what both of you would have to say about that. Do we have to find a way to do both of those things, or either of those things, or are they not workable?
Well,
And I forget who we've been starting with.
I think Lorraine probably in this case.
Okay.
Okay. I think with the loss of housing predominantly is on Oahu. And if you notice the minimum, the medium income for Oahu, because they have condominiums and the high cost of purchasing a condo or any property on Oahu is I believe more of the exodus of residents moving is from Oahu. Unlike Hawaii, the Big Island. Matter of fact, we have people moving from Oahu here to Big Island, including the east side of the island. Now, it is very, very hurting for our people to know that you're going to lose a friend or a family and move to another out of state. So with both the legislature, a year ago, we increased the housing fund to make sure that there were availability of funds that two of our housing agencies would be able to create housing for those less fortunate. Now, with regards to the amount of comparison to Oahu and the Big Island as well, it seems like it hasn't really hurt us yet, but we do have a loss of housing. With regards to transit accommodations, I'm one, whoever is in that platform right now, I don't believe that we should just cut them off with regards to having I would say the short-term rental group, that we would completely cut them off just to make sure that there's a home available. Now, several reasons. Some of the quite a bit of our short-term rental owners are residents, and they are residents here as well. They own their accommodations and they rent their room or a cottage in the back, and that's their livelihood. That's additional income that they can survive on. With going back to what I said about when we added, I believe, close to $400 million for additional housing projects, let me say that developers, not those that are going to sell it at a price that is unaffordable, but the monies that we created goes to those who are developing housing that's using state funds to accommodate those that are on the lower income, or for those that benefit in the less than the $100,000 income bracket, so that they can afford to rent a house. As an example, right here in Hilo, where you have the developments that has been built, all have been through state funding that the developer has created, where the Hayek is, as well as the senior housing on Moho'uli Street. And you're going to see additional increase of those housing because some of the nonprofit developers have already worked out their contracts with the state to use those funds to address the low-income or affordable rental homes. Now, I'm talking about rentals. The idea with, and going back to what I said, it differs between Oahu and the Big Island is because we have land for sale, and our lands here for purchasing is pretty reasonable and, affordable. Now, where you are makes a difference, but we have land mass. And one doesn't have, we're not on the vertical developments, according to the difference is what I'm saying, that the difference between Oahu and the Big Island. And so here, we're not experiencing a shortage. There is a shortage because there is no inventory right now. I understand from the realtors saying there's not enough inventories for purchasing because people are buying here on this island. And many are local people. They are our own families and having an opportunity for their children to purchase a land or their housing. However, there is a big problem that we need to address and continue to look at the situation on Oahu. And it's beyond just communicating for a year, because they're talking now about the funding mechanism of mortgages applications. The banks are not allowing any of those new purchases because of the insurance issue that we have. And most of the impact to that insurance problem is predominantly on Oahu and the condominiums issues.
Before we let you go, Senator, vacant homes tax. I got a good feel for what you think about TVRs, but the vacant homes tax, would you support that, or is that a problem?
Well, it depends, and I think there's a lot of discussions rather than just talk about each county, and it's managing by the counties. Now, when we talk, if you're talking about vacation rentals. Now, your question going again?
Well, people have floated a vacant homes tax. The governor has expressed interest in it, in basically levying that kind of a tax as a way of encouraging people who have vacant properties, vacant houses, for whatever reason, whether it's second home or whatever, to put them into the rental market. That seems to be the basic idea.
Well, that's true, and I would support a measure like that, because a lot of those homes are pretty much, if you're looking at Oahu, are owned by out-of-state residents. And if they're having that opportunity to raise their own income, not living here on Oahu, as an example, or here on the west side of the island, and they're absent owners, certainly a fee, to me, I think, would be, I guess, amenable to an acceptance, of if we're trying to create a pool of monies so that those monies charged could go into a pool where we can start looking at developing and having a pool so developers could, and I would say, not only developers, but developers that are going to create affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Flora?
I'm excited to address this one because in 2021 and 2022, our office drafted and introduced both years an empty homes fee, a bill for an empty homes fee, specifically to address the large number of vacant investment homes. Yes, there are a lot on Oahu, particularly in Honolulu, Kaka'ako specifically, but also across the entire state. We have 20% vacancy rate, and it sometimes fluctuates closer to 30% on our island. So that's a significant number of housing stock that is not available for physicians, doctors, teachers, workforce, that we hear walking door to door over and over. We hear, my kids can't afford to live here, they're moving off island, or we have shortages because there are lack of housing stock. And so I did want to say also that the median house sale for this island has gone over 1 million. And I don't consider that particularly affordable for most of our island residents. It fluctuates between 800,000 and 1 million, depending on also the side of the island, if we're looking at east side and west side. I was told by a resident just the other day, $3,000 for a 2-bedroom in Kohala. And he's born and raised in Kohala, so he's living with his parents because he cannot afford, and he has an income over 100,000. So always the question for me as a legislator that comes up for our community when it comes to affordable housing is, what is affordable? Because sometimes the AMI is so high that it's actually not speaking to our working people. It's not even speaking to most of the people that we interact with and know. And then also for who? Because if we have state funds and we use that to create affordable housing inventory with housing, there's no guarantee that residents will buy them, especially if they're, again, above this affordability and or they can't get loans. There's so many factors to purchasing a home that come into play that are beyond just the purchase price. They have to be able to have had a steady work stream and show that their expenses are enough so that they can qualify for loans. And that's a big issue that we see on DHHL property as well. So that's another set, is that we have 28,000 people on the waiting list for affordable housing. And if folks can't get loans because of it, or they can't afford to build the housing, then that creates a huge backlog. Vacation rentals, that's a whole nother one, because that's been a very active topic here in our county council recently. And I know there are people that have a wealth of knowledge in that realm in our audience right now. So I look to our community for some of the feedback on all sides of the equation, right? Because there is, again, in this discourse for figuring out what we do and how we address it, we all know that we want to be able to live here, but then we have to get past these different hurdles. And so I look to the community for a lot of these things. In terms of vacation rentals specifically, I've heard and I feel a lot more amenable to hosted vacation rentals and ones that are already existing, as opposed to growing our stock for that. However, we have to allow the counties, I think it's county by county, it's really important to uphold home rule on that kind of topic, because Maui, for example, is having a completely different crisis than Hilo, right? Or the needs in Volcano, for example, which has historically, or not historically, but in the last, let's say in the last 30 years at least, been more of a bed and breakfast community because of visitors going to the park and such. And there is oftentimes someone living on property, and that's their income source because they live out in the country. And so we always want to be looking at the legislation before us as to not hurting folks, and then getting creative about ways that we can support our small businesses in tax rebates or tax credits or something.
I am going to stop you just there, because just briefly, I should say, we are at the hour 10 mark. You seem to be engaged.
Yes.
And focused. Can we go on a little bit longer? Is everyone good with that?
Can I,
Okay,
Chad?
good. Yes, Lorraine, please.
Okay, just to say that a law was passed this past year because of the wildfires and the lack of housing for our Maui friends and families. Now, the bill that was passed was to allow the counties and the governor to take back the rental issue, the short-term rentals and the vacation rentals. And there were 3 oppositions coming from the Big Island. I voted against it, and Senator San Buenaventura and Senator Richards. And the reason that we were in opposition of it is because it would allow the counties to make decisions to do away with the rental program. And so Maui decided, well, in order to have the county cancel and delete the short-term rentals, as an example, to provide the availability of those houses to go back to the residents. And Maui's, I understand, county accepted that program. Now, why we decided against the bill is because we didn't want that to happen to the Big Island. As I stated earlier, they are benefits for short-term rentals as well, and the income that goes to the counties. Let the home rule makes its decision. And so in my discussions with the county council and council chair Heather Kimball was, where are you folks going to be on this particular issue? Because it sort of was like a mandate that the legislature is saying, do away with this vacation rentals so that we can have homes available for our own people. And so we 3 were the only ones, I understand, that voted against this measure at the legislature.
Yeah, they took 7,000. That's the plan, to take 7,000 units out. Let's go for 2 more questions from me and 2 more questions for Kevin. And remember, there's food and water, and help yourself. I do want each of you, all of you, a chance to come up afterwards and mingle and talk story a little bit. This is a question I think about in my own family. A family member needs to stop working in order to stay home and take care of their kapunas. What's your idea to help them there? And it's not just kapuna, it's spouses, people that are sick, this is really a fundamentally very difficult thing. We all know the cost of senior care in the state of Hawaii. We'll start with Laura and then Lorraine. A little maybe briefer on the answers so we can get to just a couple more questions.
I 100% support paid family leave. I did when I was in the Senate. I will continue to, because again, fundamentally, we have issues where we become sick, and then you're at risk of homelessness if you're working paycheck to paycheck. So really important that we have that safeguards in place.
Did that bill die?
Yes, it died.
It died, okay.
It does
Thank you for
die,
the crispness of the answer as well.
And it died. I do support paid leave as well, not only taking care of the kupuna or your family, but also if that person is sick as well, to continue to have the benefits go to that particular worker or person as well. However, the issue is, how much is it going to cost? And so that's the biggest issue when anything that comes up that has to do with our creation of having the ability to create something that's going to take away from our general fund and the cost of what we have and what we're going to pay out for. And so there are times and issues that I believe, if an issue as big as that, should go to the voters and let the voters decide rather than us taking the issue, because what we're doing is we're creating additional costs to all of us, and it's taking away a lot of the benefits as well of what we're enjoying that the state also already.
It's not just government, but it's businesses too. That
Exactly.
Exactly. Into that. Kevin?
And I believe, to me, I think issues like this should have the voters decide if we should
Thank
be
you,
in
Lorraine.
that way.
I wanted to speak about child welfare for a little bit. Just an issue that it's kind of grim, but we've had a series of tragedies in the child welfare system in Hawaii. Bradley and Mahiwai are Sellers and one Mahalo. The Hamo Stone here in Hilo started with that. Family with Gary Garcia. And throughout this, I don't recall a single time the legislature has called a hearing and said, we want to know what's happening. And I guess the question is, how can you guys know what needs to be fixed or what should be done if nobody ever calls those hearings and asks those questions? Because child welfare is not giving out the information. They're famously, they're slamming the door shut. Should there be those kinds of hearings? And does it make sense?
Well, I can say that that's not true for the Senate, though, because your chair from Puna, if some of you are from Puna as well, she's the chair of the Committee on Health and Human Services. She did have a hearing with regards to the subject matter. Now, the hearings with the Department of Health as well, my understanding is that she's not satisfied with what the outcome of the committee hearing that she had, and it was just during the time before we had ended the session. So she did have some hearings on the Senate side. However, there should be, and I agree totally with the mismanagement that comes out of the Department of Human Services. There should be an audit on them as well, and I understand an investigation is going on right now. So it's not a done deal, there's nothing that's happening. There is something happening as well.
Might have a little to do with John Hill's
Yes.
reporting and Kevin as well. So to be,
That was the start of my answer is I have read every single one of John Hill's reports. I have talked to him personally as a state senator, and there is a lot we can do. When the ADC got an audit, and it was scathing,
Agribusiness Development Corporation.
Agribusiness Development Corporation had a scathing audit. The very next interim, there was a House investigative committee specifically drawn up, I'm assuming by leadership, to bring a lot of these questions to the table and to go through it and ask questions publicly. Really important. So with that respect, DHS has there are a lot of things that remain unanswered that absolutely need to be addressed. Dobor as well, just to put that out there, in the same vein of making sure that we as legislators are looking at where these pitfalls are and where there's an incredible shortage of staffing.
Are you talking about?
DHS.
Okay.
So within DHS, there's an incredible shortage of staffing. We often, one of the articles talked about how kids are held overnight at the office with office workers, and folks don't know this. And it starts to really paint a picture that is very scary, and I am committed to looking at it. I think we have to address the nexus between military, with tourism, with business tourism, and our human sex trafficking trade. Again,
That's another story.
not necessarily insinuating that they are or are not connected, but we have to get to the investigation
Okay,
with
I
that.
think we'll just go with two last questions. Kevin, and then I have one final question, and then we're gonna have everybody get up and stretch their legs and so forth.
Take a break.
Yeah, and we don't want to get locked in this parking lot either. So Kevin, one more for you. and
Sure,
then-
just a very quick one. I mean, on a lighter subject, Banyan Drive. I think everybody knows that Banyan Drive once was much more than it is today. And we're looking at, Country Club, the Naniloa, I understand, is being held by its own bank. I mean, is there anything that can be done about Banyan Drive, and what and when will it get done? Because
We're
it's
already doing something.
well, talk about this,
Okay.
Senator, because
All right. I was elected to be the Senate for Senate District 1 2 years ago. And this is what I talked about in my brochure that you'll be seeing as well, that there's a lot of work to do. That issue on Banyan Drive started years ago. I was the senator for Senate District 4. So Banyan Drive and Hilo is not in my district. Having said that, with regards to me becoming your senator for Hilo, the issue with regards to, number one, there was no funding to get rid of Uncle Billy's. Now, even when I was the senator for Senate District 4, I already had asked for CIP, even though I wasn't the senator for the district. We got $8 million, so we start the process to make sure that we get rid of the big menace and the peninsula. So currently, we also were having issues with the ownership of Naniloa Hotel because of the lack of funding and paying their bill to the state because they're on lease lands. So when I did come on and started investigation of the Naniloa, because I've already heard that they were going to be foreclosed. In my findings, found out that yes, we did have problems with not paying the rent. So the foreclosure process was already in place. As chair of the Water and Land, I oversee the land leases. And so I got involved heavily with looking at the peninsula. And having worked there for 21 years, as beautiful, and we know that you enjoyed Banyan Drive in those years as well, it's very important that we get rid of first the menace of Uncle Billy's and looking at the other area, including those apartment buildings. Now, from what I've heard with regards to the foreclosure that was already in place, it was moving, then the contract originally spanned during the term of Billy Inouye, when the county decided they're going to take over the development of Banyan Drive. And that was like 12, 13 years ago. When I came on as your senator, I talked to the DLNR to say, we're going to take back, because the county was supposed to do the development, clean up the peninsula. The state will take it back, because by the time I came on, it was 12 years of doing nothing. The foreclosure has been done. A company that has nothing to do with being developed by a hotel division or a developer or I guess, a resort development owner now is in the hands of a financial company. Now, Naniloa, as we all know, if a fund agency or a finance company or a bank owns a hotel, you know they're not developers. They're going to sell. So that's the concern that I have. Now, what the plans are, because we should be having an answer soon with regards to how we're going to look at Banyan Drive or Naniloa, we are asking the Naniloa Hotel, this is the offer from DLNR Land Division, is to take back the golf course. Get it out of the hands of Naniloa because as you saw and you see the mismanagement of the golf course, the weeds are growing. So with that plan is DLNR is looking at taking back the property on the golf course, lessen the lease to Naniloa, and then create a plan which I understand a contract is out looking at a consultant to plan the peninsula to allow several hotels. We don't need five-star hotels. We can't build on the waterfront. And so we need to continue to build, or the plan is, and that's one of my plans, we need to save the marijuana. The Marijuana Festival depends on hotel accommodations. And let me share with you, Oahu is just waiting to take marijuana away from us. If we don't create hotel accommodations, then hopefully that won't happen. But the development plan is to look at redevelopment of Banyan.
Got it, thank you. Briefly, Laura, sorry, I'm always interested in equal time, but we should have your views on Banyan Drive. And then I'm just going to very quickly have some conclusion notes that kind of get to that final question, because I do want us to be able to talk and stretch. You guys, in particular, are very thoughtful and very articulate, and I've appreciated in the depth that all of you have gone to, and as well as the questions from you. But on Banyan Drive.
Just because I do want to say very brief, I'm going to say that the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over that we have done for years. And in talking with area legislators since 2021, specifically about Waiakeakai and Banyan Drive, there's been a logjam of different personalities and different agendas that have conflicted and conflated the problem. So working forward, we're looking at a community-based solution to our visitor accommodations. There has to be shoreline retreat because of sea level rise. We have to take into consideration all those mitigations, bioremediation. That area used to feed thousands, if not millions. And looking at that as a source of food and to be able to regenerate it where it's not polluted with lead. Working in office, I talked a lot with the EPA around brownfields and also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in terms of bringing federal funds with our Infrastructure Act. But the thing about that is it has to be community driven, it has to be community based, it has to be regenerative because of the nature of where we're going, not where we've been.
Thank you. Here's what we did not get to. Environmental justice include U.S. trade pollution and contamination, early childhood care. This is my favorite. Who are your top donors to your campaign, and what's the average campaign contribution? I guess I'll write a story about that one. What project are you most proud of? What projects are you hoping to do? Give back. And this one really touched me. A parent of a special needs child. There aren't quite the facilities. It's an art that's here. It's included Oahu. LGBTQ plus issues. Amazingly, nothing on TMT came up. And one last thing on Banyan Drive, I didn't even bring up food sustainability. Native Hawaiians lands after the tsunami apparently were impacted. I didn't know about that issue so much. Here's how I'm going to end this. Any point that either of you wants to make, succinctly, that you haven't had a chance to say. It could be one of these topics, and then we will open it up to all you folks. Laura and then Lorraine.
I want to say thank you to those who have come and those who will be watching in the future. Thank you for taking the time to engage in civics. I think an informed electorate is pivotal to where we're going. I think it's really important that we engage our youth. If we look at those voting in our community, we have a deficit of 65 and under who are choosing to vote. And as a teacher for 17 years, and also an experienced legislator, going back into the legislature as a future senator, I will make sure that I reach out into community to make sure to educate folks on the process and continue to raise our electorate, including my son. Thank you for being here, and my family. I just wanted to mahalo you all for being here, my mom and dad and my husband, who have been pivotal in this whole process, and really looking forward and doing what is important for now. Times have changed really drastically in the last 10 years, and we can see the impact. The decisions that are made in the legislature and in state politics don't really take effect for another 2, 3, 10, 20 years. And so right now, we're seeing the impact of the last 20 to 40 years of the way of doing things. And personally, I grew up with trickle-down theory, and I feel like we are seeing the result of the fact that that doesn't work. And so switching that whole mentality to economies of care, regenerative methodologies, diversification. If we have failed at diversifying our economy, now's the time to do it. If there was never a better time, it is now. Mahalo.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you. Why I'm running for re-election, there are several projects that I've already had started and would like to complete it as well. As an example, CTAR, the College of Tropical Agriculture. We have the base out on Steinbach Highway that there's over, I would say, close to 40 acres that's under the College of Tropical Agriculture. In my visit, when I did do my tour of the district, found that the College of Tropical Agriculture budget has not been increased, and we have lost many of our agents. In my visit, found out that this is a research center, and the goal that I have is to increase our sustainability with the food service and sustainability in building and making sure that CTAR continue to be the lead in providing the research that they've always had on their plate. So 2 years ago, I found that the research buildings has fallen apart. And so I provided with CIP dollars, $8 million to get rid of the research buildings that's there, and now is in the process of redoing and revamping our College of Tropical Agriculture. Now there's other projects, continuing our airport and our pier that's been on my plate for many, many years. And many of you already see that with the changes we've made with our Hilo airport and the expansion of our pier. We know that this island is growing. The Hilo pier, we've already added one pier for young brothers. We are going to be purchasing the lands that are close to the entrance to increase the capacity for the entire pier area to accommodate all of those cargoes that's coming in, as well as not, it's confirming with the federal mandate that we have with regards to stacking of our cargo that's coming in. As you know, the capacity right there is the holding pattern for all of those cargo that's coming in containers is over the limit. And so we need to increase and make sure that we can accommodate the goods that's coming in as well. the Hilo Airport, we're continuing to have its second development stage. And I'm happy to say, and I think all the women here probably, if you've been to the airport, that at least we have some nice restrooms. However, but more to come. There are
Senator,
many
thank you.
issues that I'd like to continue to, and I ask for your vote and the re-election of my candidate.
Thank you, Senator Inouye. Thank you, Senator Acasio. Thank you, Kevin Dayton. Thank you, Vikings, Hilo High School. Yeah.